If we haven't met yet, my name is Ana Lopez. I'm a sexologist, sex coach, and smut consultant. I'm the owner of Sex and Spanglish, as well as the hostess of this podcast that also goes by the same name, Sex and Spanglish. Sexologist Me is currently completing a dissertation on what it means to be a Latina and a sexual being at the same time. And in the near future, I'm going to be interviewing states-based Latinas about their sexual experiences through the eyes of a Latina. So stay tuned for any updates on that. If you're looking for a Latina sex coach, you can work with me one of three ways. The first is La Sinvergüenza Symposium, which is my 12-month group coaching program uniquely made for Latinas. Second, Textual Healing, which is my one-on-one coaching program done completely via app-based messaging. And then there's Operation Orgasm, which is my online independent study course that teaches you everything that you need to know about having mind-blowing sex on demand, even if your partner doesn't know what the hell they're doing. All of the program information to any of these programs and their respective links are located in the show notes of this episode. If you write sex scenes, we need to talk, as I'm currently accepting consulting clients. I work with readers to avoid getting canceled and to stop perpetuating sex negative narratives. Authors, talking to you, y'all have the best intentions, and some of you are still perpetuating sex negative narratives, and I want to help you stop that. So you can download a free copy of How to Write Sex Positive Sex Scenes Without Boring Your Readers using the link in the show notes of this episode. My vision for my business and the work that I do in the world as a sexologist, sex coach, and smut consultant is to pave the way for the Latina woman to live a life sin vergüenza by embracing their individual sexuality and their Latinidad at the same damn time. My mission with Sex and Spanglish is to provide culturally relevant sex ed that centers the individual and their personal desires and values while shifting the sex negative narratives that pose as a barrier to true guilt-free pleasure. There are only three things that you need in order to have mind-blowing sex on demand: an understanding of your body, the ability to effectively communicate that, and the skills of rest and rejuvenation. And in today's episode, we're going to be taking a deep dive into effective communication, particularly effective communication that happens inside of the bedroom. So in the moment when y'all are getting down and dirty, and maybe you're not in the bedroom, maybe you're in the kitchen or the couch or what have you, but wherever you are having sex, you want to be able to effectively communicate in the moment. Before I get into what specific conversations you should be having in the moment, I want to revisit the definition of effective communication. Now, I covered this in another episode, but I wanted to quickly revisit it so that it is at the top of your mind when we talk about this. So, effective communication is emotional regulation, self-awareness, and having your own back. And I'm going to very quickly go over each of those. So, what is emotional regulation? Emotional regulation is having your emotions without ignoring them or letting them control you. That means allowing yourself to be mad at your partner and allowing your partner to be mad at you without saying things that you're going to regret later. You can feel mad without calling them out their name, throwing shit, right? Doing all of this petty shit, right? You're not ignoring your emotions and acting like you're not mad or distracting yourself from being mad by smoking, drinking, going out, all of those things, right? You're also not letting your emotions control you. So you're not doing things to stop being mad. So, seeking revenge, yelling at them, throwing things, right? You're not being a tóxica. So when we talk about emotional regulation, essentially it is allowing yourself to feel a quote unquote negative emotion and act like maturely from it, right? That is emotional regulation. If every time you get mad or upset, you end up being like tóxica, that means that you are not emotionally regulated. And this isn't to judge you, but I want to point this out because the next thing is self-awareness. And we need to be aware if we are not emotionally regulated. Okay, self-awareness is an understanding of your thoughts and emotions, right? Understanding, what are my thoughts currently? What am I feeling? Many of you, I ask you, y'all get on consult calls, right? You get on the quickie calls with me. Some of my clients may be listening to this and I ask you how you're feeling and you don't know how to answer. That is not self-awareness, right? We need to build that skill of self-awareness. And it's also having your own back, right? Owning your own experience, even when others don't understand, don't share the same experience. It's the willingness to walk away, the willingness to meet your own needs and desires. And again, I want to reiterate that it's okay if you don't know how to communicate effectively because it wasn't modeled for most of us, and that it's okay. You can learn because it wasn't modeled for me either, and I do it well now, enough to that I am teaching you. So again, effective communication is emotional regulation, self-awareness, and having your own back. So with that said, let's get into conversations that are happening in the bedroom, in the moment, when you're already doing the deed, right? So a vast majority of conversations about sex should actually happen outside of the bedroom when you're not having sex fully clothed in another room, right? There are, however, 4 types of conversations that happen in the bedroom. And you can easily remember this by using the acronym DUST. So like polvo, right? DUST. D stands for desire, something that you want. If there is something you want that's not happening, then you need to voice that in the moment. Otherwise, you're not going to get it. U stands for uncomfortable or something that you don't want. If something is uncomfortable or there's something happening that you don't want, you don't like, then you need to stop it or redirect it. Otherwise, you're going to continue experiencing the thing that is uncomfortable, the thing that you don't want, the thing that you don't like. S stands for stop. If you want to stop for any reason, it doesn't matter why. You actually don't need a fucking reason. Stop. That needs to be said right then and there. If you're in pain, if you don't want to have sex anymore, you changed your mind, whatever, you need to stop right then and there. And the T stands for trigger. And I'm going to dedicate an entire episode on this because there's some nuance here. There are people that will feel triggered and want to continue having the conversation. And then there are also going to be people that feel triggered and I said continue the conversation. Let me back up. There will be people that feel triggered during sex that will want to continue having sex. There will be people that feel triggered during sex that don't want to continue. They want to stop. And both of those are valid things to do, valid positions to have. That said, I want to dedicate an entire episode to this topic. So I'm not going to go in depth here. Just know that sometimes you may find yourself, you may find yourself triggered during sex, and you may want to have this conversation in the moment, like right then and there when it's happening, as it's happening, or you may want to have this conversation outside. For me, this has happened both ways, which is why I want to share it and I want to go into nuance. And again, I want to give it the time that it deserves. So that said, there will be a whole other episode on triggers and how to have those specific conversations. But for the purposes of this episode, stopping is very obvious, right? You just stop. That's it. That's super easy. But I want to get into what happens if there's something you want that you're not currently getting, or if you're uncomfortable, there's something you're experiencing that you don't want or you don't like, and how to solve for that, how to have that conversation. So that conversation is had by using something called redirection. I am obsessed with redirection. I use it in many scenarios, not just during sex. And you may have actually used it yourself. This is going to sound really weird, but you may have used it with your child. You may have used it with an animal, like a pet that you might have. So just pointing that out there, that you may have already used this and you may already have this skill. Now you just need to apply it to the bedroom. So let's imagine you're in the middle of having sex and your partner does something that you don't like, that it's uncomfortable, right? You have 2 options. You can yell at them to stop, disrupting the entire session, or you can redirect. So before I go into what redirection is and like how to do it, I feel the need to mention that there may be times when you want to abruptly stop a sex session and you have the authority to do so. For example, like if you're feeling if it's like painful and like, you know what, this kind of like ruined the moment for me, like something happened, like something twisted wrong or, whatever. And you're like, it kind of ruined the moment for me. I don't want to have sex anymore. Again, you're allowed to stop. And you're allowed to redirect if you want to and try it out and see what happens. There isn't a list of approved reasons to abruptly stop a session. So I'm not going to give you examples on purpose, but I just want to let you know that that is an option. So redirection is simply redirecting your partner to where you want them to be at any given time. So this applies if they're doing something you don't like. This also applies if you want them to do something that they're not currently doing, right? So maybe what they're doing is not something necessarily that is uncomfortable, you don't like it, but you're like, well, I want you to go over here instead, right? This will solve for this. So redirection is simply redirecting your partner where you want them to be, just in the way that you would direct your toddler's attention to a toy you want them to have versus the kitchen knife. Same thing with a dog, cat, etc., right? You don't want them playing with a kitchen knife, obviously. And you can redirect your partner's attention to where you want it to be in the same way. Like, bro, let me distract you like with my boobs instead of, I don't know, whatever the fuck else they're doing, right? Okay, so I'm going to give you two different examples. Scenario one, you like what they are doing, just not where they are doing it. So you like what they are doing, like with their tongue, hand, etc., just not where they're doing it. For example, you like how they're moving their tongue, but don't want that specific movement done on your nipples. You could say something to the effect of, I love what you're doing, and I would love it even more if you could do it here instead. And show them where. So it could sound like, more specifically, I love what you're doing, and I would love it even more if you could do it on my clit instead. If you could do it on my left nipple instead, if you could do it on my neck instead, if you could do it in my mouth instead, and show them where you want it to go. Now, this is a little bit tricky, especially if it's like a tongue or like maybe you can't reach, right? Or it's like physically impossible for you to do that, but you need to guide them to where you want them to go and be willing to stay there until they get it correct. Okay. So, the second scenario is, before I get into the continuation. So scenario one was you like what they're doing, just not where they are doing it. Scenario two is you like where they are playing, just not how they are doing it. So you like the area, just not how they're doing it. So for example, you like that they're playing with your nipples, but not how they're doing it. You're like, bro, slow the fuck down, right? So you could say, I love when you play with my nipples, and I would love it even more if you did it like this, and show them. If your boobs are big enough to show them how to do it yourself. If they're not, you can mimic with your mouth if you like, right? Move their head to, where you want it to be, whatever. Remember, is not your partner's job or responsibility to know how you want things done or where. It's not. There's no way that they can know. Show them how you want it done, or at the very least, explain how you want it done, particularly in the scenarios where well, I can't reach my clit with my mouth. So like, what the fuck, right? So like, I get it. But people are not mind readers, and that includes your partner. It is a common misconception that your partner should know how to please you. I don't give a shit if you've been together for 40 years, your partner should not know, because your body changes, your gustos change, right? Your sexual preferences change, things that you like. What you like may change from day to day, moment to moment, depending on how you're feeling, your cycle, hormones, blah, 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 all of the things. It is not your partner's responsibility or their job to know how you want things done or where, and the same goes for you. It is not your responsibility. And it is very likely that if you are putting all of all of the responsibility on your partner for them to know how you want things done or where, you're probably also putting that same responsibility on yourself to know how and when they want things done. So I just want to point that out. That is a whole other conversation, but that needs to be said. Okay, so once they are doing it, quote unquote, right, in the way that you want it done and in the right place, then you want to affirm them with one of the following affirmations. You could do this verbally. So you can say something like, yes, right there, or whatever the fuck tickles your fancy. I don't care what you say, but affirm, right? Like you're doing it correctly or whatever. Something that sounds natural to you. You can even moan if you want. Visually, right? Like keep in mind, they have to be able to see you, right? If they're not looking at you, then like you can't just nod your head. Like that's not gonna work. But if they can see you, you can nod your head of like, yes, that's how I want it done, right? Um, you can also do a physical affirmation of like pushing their head or hand down a little bit harder. Not too hard, right? You're not shoving them, but you're just like, yes, like patting them on the head, the hand, whatever, or push yourself further into them, right? So you can move your body up if that's what you want to do. You can also do a combination. So you can nod your head and say yes. You can push yourself into them and say yes. You can push yourself into them and nod your head, like all of those things, right? Um, yeah, so that is redirection, my friends. I hope this was helpful. If you have a specific scenario where you're like, my partner keeps doing this, I don't know how to fuck to redirect this, I don't understand, send me a DM at Sex and Spanglish. Again, Spanglish, not Spanish, on Instagram, and I will help you out. My DMs are always open. I'll talk to y'all soon.